What's up, y'all, and welcome back to the Michael Experience Podcast. I am your orator and originator, Michael, and these are my thoughts, my life, my way. All right, so before we get started, I want to send a special thank you and shout out to my Apple Podcast subscribers. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast in that way. It really does mean the world to me. And for those of you all that have not subscribed to Apple Podcasts, it is the platinum subscription where you get exclusives, behind the scenes, mic drop moments, and other tidbits. So if you have not, make sure you subscribe over on Apple Podcasts. All right, so we are still in the life lessons and the hardest life lessons series. And so, one of the things I want to talk about is the art of letting go. Now, I know that for a lot of us, that is easier said than done, right? And for some of us, we like, nah, maybe Mike, not for me. My cutoff game is strong. Okay, well, we're gonna put that to the test. We're gonna see how strong it really is, because it's not just about telling somebody to get away from me or blocking somebody or deciding to remove them from your space, but how do you remove them from your mind and your heart? So I want to make sure I challenge us in that way too. But the art of letting go for me has been a journey. And if I'm being very honest with it, my first lesson in letting go really came from my family. So I have an older brother and an older sister. And then, of course, my mother. My father wasn't very present, at least not in the household. Well, if you've watched that or listened to that podcast episode, you'll understand that more. But for most of my early life, it was me, my mother, and then my older two siblings. And so the first thing I had to do was figure out how to let them go. And it was really in terms of space at first, because we grew up in a small home. And at one point, me and my brother shared a bedroom, but it was just all of us in close proximity every day growing up, every single day. And so we were very close in that way. But we grew up in a very small town and we were living there. And I didn't see that my mother and my stepfather at the time, I didn't see that they were going to move us out of there in search of a bigger, better life. But I always knew from a very early age that this just wasn't it for me. When I say this, I mean growing up in a small town in Indiana. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to have to let these people go. But what does that really mean? And so my first thought was just like, I got to get away. Like, I just have to get away from them, because I believe you don't know how you're going to feel until you are actually away from people. And so, from the earliest moments I could think of, when I started driving and things like that, I started just going places and doing things away from my family, away from my friends that I had known. And a lot of them were relatives and cousins and things like that. So, I was just like, let me get away from what is familiar to me. That way I can begin the process of understanding, like, if I'm going to feel some type of way when I'm away from them. And so that was the first thing I had to do. Now, there's a caveat in all of this for me, because I was a teen parent. I had my daughter when I was 16. And so, at a time where I was moving around in the world or trying to move around in the world, I kind of had this thing almost anchoring me as well that I did not want to let go of. And so, the art of letting go really just pulled on my emotional, mental, just in every way it could possibly be. It just pulled on those strings. But what I will say is, because I had been with my family longer, that was the thing that I was like, okay, it was the first thing that hit me. So, um, I think I think it started with my mom, and I just was so used to talking to my mom all the time about everything, good, bad, indifferent, or whatever. I was just so used to talking to my mom. And then I started noticing where there would be maybe a couple of days that we didn't speak. Like I would go and do my thing and then we wouldn't talk for that weekend or something like that. And so it kind of started me to be thinking like, well, what would my mom think or what would my mom say in certain moments? And so I was just like, okay, well, whatever. Maybe this is just regular teenage stuff. Like, you're weighing what well, like kind of like what would Jesus do? What would my mom do? And so that was just kind of how it manifested at first for me. And then I something happened where I don't know where this shift happened, but I want to say probably somewhere around 17 and 18. So this was a very like I don't know, stark thing, contrast or stark. I don't know how to describe what I'm trying to say, but it happened almost abruptly, I guess is what I'm trying to say, even though a year or 2 years is a long time. But somewhere around 17 or 18, I was like, I have to get used to not having my mom be a part of like my everyday thinking. And so I just was like, okay, well, I will call my mom when I feel like I need to, and not necessarily because it's a habit. And once I kind of shifted away from that, then I was able to kind of make the shift away from my sister and my brother. Now, my brother and I me and my brother always had a very fluid relationship. And what I mean by that is like, when we see each other, we see each other. When we speak to each other, we speak to each other. Even like in the same house, he and I were like two ships passing all the time. And then we would have these moments where we would come together and they would be great moments. So he and I always had kind of like that fluid thing. Even now as adults, like me and my brother can go months without speaking, or we can just have like a text situation every couple of months or something. And there's really nothing missing, and there's really no harm, no foul there. And then when we get together, we have the most amazing times. And so me and my brother have always had that kind of thing. But me and my sister, for the majority, we were very, very close, like sharing secrets with each other. Like we talked to each other. We were stuck at the hip. People thought we were twins for most of our lives. And we're not. We're like 9 months apart, I believe. We're 9 months apart. My mom was getting it in. But I think, yeah, we're like 9 months apart from each other and stuff like that. But so anyway, my sister and I were just very, very close. We just always had this like good synergy about us and stuff like that. So then it was my sister, and then I was like, dang, like now, okay, I gotten used to not talking to my mom as much. And then I was like, what about my sister? So my sister and I kind of maintained this connection throughout my early adulthood, like my early 20s. Me and my sister kind of kept the same thing. And, when I moved away, I just moved about an hour away into the larger city because I was like, I got to get out of here. And my sister would come down on weekends. She would bring her boys because she had two boys at the time. She would bring her boys. And so me and my sister would see each other very, very regularly all the way through my early 20s. And even, I will say, when I moved to Texas the first time, that was in 2013, my sister took a flight. Did she take a flight? My sister took a flight here just to make sure I got settled because her and I, we were just that for a very long time. And so, it was kind of like I wonder when her and I would have a shift. And that happened honestly when she got married. Like she was with a guy. They were together at the time when she came to visit me, but they were still kind of in that beginning stage and stuff like that. And where she was still like, that's my brother, and whatever. And so, so their relationship was kind of still early and blossoming. Then they got married, and then, she started having more children with him. And that's when her and I started to disconnect in that way. And then that was the other time where the art of letting go was just really like, oh my goodness, like I'm having to make this stark change from the way that I communicate and the way I connect. with the person that I have been the closest to my whole life, you know. Now, my mom is one thing, right? And we know that, you know, as children get older and you start building your own families and doing things and you move, of course, that's going to be one thing. Like most of us, a lot of us, not, I won't say most, a lot of us are trying to get away from our parents anyway to establish our independence. So that's par for the course. But my sister, who I had been so close to that people thought we were twins, I was like, I wonder when that's going to happen. Not that I wanted it to, but I knew at some point that it would happen, especially, you know, where she was going in her relationship or whatever. But when it happened, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't off guard. And I think it's because I had been mentally preparing for a long time that my sister was going to have children. And she always said she wanted a big family. And so I think I had always been mentally preparing myself for the moment where we wouldn't be texting each other every day or we wouldn't be calling each other every other day. And we would just be living our lives. And so that was the next time that the art of letting go really was like, okay, you're going to have to let go of this in more than just a physical way. You know what I'm saying? So that was that. I will talk about my daughter a bit because I did mention and introduce it into this conversation. My daughter was the situation that was a little bit different because I was 16 when she was born. And so I hadn't spent the majority of my life with her, if that makes sense. The majority of her life has been spent with me, but for me, right, the way that my mind works, I didn't really know her. And I don't mean that any way that's, you know, negative or untoward. I just hadn't established anything really with her. And it's just that's just how life is or whatever. And I'm saying the quiet thing out loud, but it's the truth. You know, it's the truth, okay? But so my daughter, I was in conflict when I made the move from Indiana to Texas. So mind you, she's you know, like 8 or 9 at this point when I made the decision to move. Let me think. Yeah, she's like 8 or 9 at this point when I decided to move to Texas. And so I'd always been close enough to where I could jump in my car and go to her if need be. But the art of letting go for me with her was really about relinquishing control because the one thing that I was very clear on from the moment she came into this world is like I have to protect her. There was like an instant, you know, when she came into the world there was just this instant feeling and connection of like you have to protect her for life. You just have to protect her for life. Whatever that means. Even at a very early age I knew that it was just a sense of it. And so not being able to get to her quickly was the thing that I was just like, "Oh my god, like am I going to be able to emotionally and mentally do that and not be worried constantly?" Now, here's the thing. I believe that anytime you have children, you're always going to worry about them from here till they're gone. You're going to worry about them. I know that now, but as I'm kind of making my way through that, I was thinking like I feel extra anxious about leaving because like how am I going to protect her? Like I'm not going to be just, you know, an hour ride away if something happens. I'm going to be literally, you know, a day's drive if that, and then, you know, a couple hours flight, which at the time I wasn't making enough money to fly consistently, right? Like barely, maybe once a month I would have been able to fly back. So I was like, well, what am I like, how am I gonna make that change? And so the art of letting go for that really just challenged the ways in which I felt like I could still stay connected and I could still be a part of making sure that everything she needed to feel safe and to feel whole was being provided. And so I was like, okay, that's going to look very, very different for me. And I'm not going to say it was easy. That one was very hard for me to do because I had moments where I did find myself on people's doorsteps and I did find myself almost threatening people when I felt uncomfortable or uneasy about situations. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. I, looking back on it, always thought that like my displays of, to me, they were me trying to protect her, but I would show up to people and I would, have these conversations with people and not threatening like a physical harm kind of way, but just like a very stern, like, look, this is how it's going to happen, or, kind of situation. So, that was a little bit harder for me. But I will tell you that the moment I was able to let go in that instance is my daughter called me. She called me one time and I showed up, and I wasn't gonna just not show up for her. And so I was like, you know what, whatever it is, I'm showing up. And so I showed up and I was just ready to huff and puff and blow the house down. And she was at her grandmother's house at that time, not my mother, but on her mother's side, she was at her house at that time. And so when I got there, I was just ready, guns ablazing. I was ready and da 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 da. And so the grandmother and I had some very strong conversations, and we just really sat and had a heart to heart in which she made me realize that giving giving up control in the situation wasn't giving up on my child, basically. And so because I felt like I needed to do these things, because in my mind, it was like I wanted her to be safe, but really I was doing the things because controlling them made me feel like I was, or me trying to control the optics of me thinking I was controlling made me feel like I was doing what I set out to do, what I consider my spiritual contract for my daughter. It made me feel like I was doing that when in reality, I was probably making a situation a little bit worse. And it wasn't intentional. It just, I mean, my intentions were in the right place, but it just was probably exacerbating situations that I didn't fully understand at the time. And then there were undercurrents with my daughter's mom that I was not aware. And so we just had a heart to heart, and I was able to understand her perspective and where she was coming from, also like how that played in my life. And if I truly wanted what was best for my child at the time, that stability that she was going to be able to get would be much more than what I believe I would have given her in my quest of moving and being across the country where I have no one but me, right? Now, part of me was like, I'll take her wherever. You know what I mean? I was like, I will take my daughter wherever I go, wherever I come, she's welcome. If I get into a relationship, they're going to have to understand. And that was one of the parameters that I always had. When my daughter calls and she's coming, like she's coming. You know what I mean? There's no if, ands, or buts about it. And so, but that was the first art of letting go for me when it came to my child, is I had to relinquish the control, which really was about securing her, stability, and that I could still be a critical part of loving and making her feel protected and secured, just in a very, very different way, by being available and being, nurturing and all those things. And then just harnessing the time that we had together and making sure that in those moments, especially, she felt the presence. But letting go took a lot. There would be moments where I would randomly think about her. There would be moments that I would have like random worry, and I would just be like, what can you do? Like, what can you do? Just keep on showing up, keep on just having those everyday conversations, because if you allow the negativity to take over and the what ifs to take over, it's really going to defeat you emotionally. And so I was just like, I'm not going to spend my time worrying. I'm not going to spend my time panicking. And, whatever. If I want to call, I'm going to call. If she's at school, then I'll, wait till she's out, whatever the case may be. And if I want to book a trip, I book a trip. And so that is just how I started moving in the situation. Um, but to kind of wrap this back around, I wanted to give you those stories, those scenarios for context, because it was very, very different in which they happened. So when I think about my mom, I started creating like incremental distance, physically, but also just in the way that we communicated because I didn't want to rely on that and it to become an unhealthy codependence to my mother. I needed my own independence. When it came to me and my sister, I had to let go of that, everyday kind of situation because we both were in a state of transition in our lives where we were walking into newness and we were following our own program, and in order to do so, right, you can't always hold on to the exact same things. You've got to let go of something, and as I've said before, in order to allow new things in, we sometimes have to let go of the old things, or we have to create the spaces, and that means giving up something or another, right? And it doesn't have to be a bad thing, it's just a thing. And so when I think about the fluidity of my brother and I's relationship, why couldn't I have that with everybody and it be fine? Became the question. Like, does it have to be? And that's how I kind of, with my family first, was able to kind of get over it. Cause I was like, yeah, like we don't have to have that every day. But then that transcended into every other relationship that I had where I was like, we don't have to see each other every day and we don't have to talk every day to know that there is love and to know that, there is synergy. Because just like with me and my brother and what kind of happened with the rest of my family, we cannot see each other for months, we cannot talk to each other for weeks, months, but when we all get together, it literally is like we have never left. It is just like, Def Comedy Jam. It becomes a very big comedy show between all of us, and I am just like, you know I'm just really just in awe of how that happened. But yeah, it is very much so one of those things, right? And it really is about the art of letting go. So one of the things that I have said for a long time, and I will continue to say, and I said it in another episode of Life Lessons, is that you don't have ownership over people, regardless of what your affiliation is, your familial tie to someone is, even if you have a marriage certificate, you do not have ownership or agency over people. You don't. And I think that sometimes we be like, well, my best friend, and that is my mom, and my this and my that. And from a psychological standpoint, we do begin to think that there is like some brand on them that says they belong to me and nobody else can have them or take them from me. And if they do deviate from that, it's going to be a problem. There are so many situations that happen that way and end in toxic, relationships and toxic exchanges. For me, I've always held like I do not have agency or ownership over another person because they can move when they want to move, they can speak when they want to speak, and they can think however they want to. And whatever is innately a part of them is something that I cannot change because it comes from within. It comes from within. And so, with that in mind, right, like I said in the other episode, I remind myself of that constantly in relationships. And I'm using that in terms of everybody, okay? Every type of relationship because you're not just my friend, you're not just my lover, you belong to you. And so whatever else in the world you come into contact with that feels good to you, that you feel connected to, then that is just who you are and that is what you will do. And the moment that I no longer fit in your story, you are well within yourself to say, you know what? I'm opting out of this program. We've grown apart, or, you no longer serve me. And that's okay. And I have the same autonomy over myself to do the same. And although some people are like, well, Michael, that just, that's no loyalty. That is the highest form of loyalty that you can have is the loyalty to yourself first. if you can't be loyal to yourself and you can't be honest with yourself, you certainly can't be it for anything for anybody else, for any situation or anybody else. You're just putting up a farce and you are just pretending at that particular point. Never dishonor and disservice yourself to show up for somebody else. That just should never happen. That should never happen because you're showing up as a fraud. You're showing up as a fraud. And so I denounce this, well, you should be loyal in that way. No. No, you should be loyal to the things in your life that you value, and you should be loyal to the truth of whatever the situation and the relationship is. You should be loyal to that. And if at any moment that begins to sway too far left or too far away from what you feel good about, then you need to address it and move on. And so those are the things that for me really, really help you tap into the art of letting go. So let me talk about another thing in that, right? Is trying to make fetch happen. And if you've never heard that, it's really the idea of trying to make something work that really just does not work, you know? And I liken it to puzzle pieces, right? Similar puzzles, but different pieces, right? Like you can have two farmhouse puzzles, but one is a red and one is black, when you look at it, farmhouses. So you could try to put it in there. You may think it, but it's going to stick out like a sore thumb and it's not going to work. And the picture is still going to be incomplete. It does not go there. So I liken it to that. If something doesn't work, don't try to make it work. And I say that in friendships, in romantic relationships, in family ships. Sometimes it just doesn't work. I've seen so many people in life try to make these TV sitcom, family show kind of dynamics with their family. And that's just not the type of family they have. You know what I'm saying? So, like, if you watched Family Matters here in the States, right? Carl Winslow and his wife, and they were just this wholesome family, and everybody loved everybody, and it was just so sweet. Or if you're familiar with the Cosby shows, all of those things that give you just this euphoric kind of connection, and then you go try to recreate that with your family and it's not working. It's just not working. The Not every person has the same capacity. They don't. Not every person has the same capacity. There's going to be someone in your life that is going to feel what you think the role of another person should be. So, case in point, if you looked at one of these TV shows and you was like, I'm going to make my mother be that woman, and your mother is not that woman. She doesn't have the similar attributes. She doesn't have the similar backgrounds or whatever, but you're trying to make her be that. And she, for whatever reason, it's just not happening. And so now she's disconnected even more from you. And you are even more pissed off with her for not becoming who you want her to be. That is what I mean by, trying to make fetch happen, which I don't do. I am absolutely not going to do it. And I don't feel like anybody owes me anything because that'll sure make you feel like you have some ownership or, some allegiance. Well, they owe me. Oh, nobody owes you anything. You know what I mean? It would be nice if people showed up in particular ways for you, but nobody owes you anything. So trying to make fetch happen, just like your brother and sister, sometimes that really close, that really laying on each other's shoulders, that I can tell them anything. Sometimes that happens with your siblings. Sometimes it does not. And you find it in a best friend, right? But again, making fetch happen. Like you cannot go around trying to make fetch happen. It just isn't. Same thing in romantic relationships. You see somebody that is gorgeous. Oh my God, he's gorgeous. She's gorgeous. They're gorgeous. Ooh, they just look so good. I want to just climb on them and climb in them and do all the things with them. They look great. but they don't feel great to me. Their energy seems a little bit off around me. They don't romance me the way that I want to be romanced. They don't talk to me the way that I want to be talked to. But you know what? I'm going to try to make it happen. I'm going to tell them over and over and over again to do these things until they get it. And when they don't get it, I'm going to be upset and I'm going to yell and I'm going to scream and I'm going to tell them how bad of a person they are to me. But I'm going to stay here for the duration of it until it works out. Again, trying to make fetch happen. And I think this happens a lot of times with people in all kinds of relationships, but it's one of those things that I said I will absolutely not do. And so, what I know about all of us is that we grow and change at very different rates. And it causes us to go down different intellectual paths and emotional paths throughout life. And so maybe at some point we were working together and it felt good and it felt synergetic. But at some point, we grew up, we matured, hormones kicked in, our level of attraction got heightened and changed. Whatever, we all go through the changes much differently. There are some of us that arrive at our sexual, incitement at different levels in our life. Some of us is right at teenagers. That was me. I was hot and ready. Okay, Little Caesars. I'm not trying to put y'all out of business, but I was hot and ready, as a teenager. But there are some people that get well into college and they're like, yeah, I don't care nothing about that stuff. And then they find somebody and then sparks fly. And then from that moment on, they're like, oh my God, my sex drive is in overdrive. And oh my goodness. And so I say that to illustrate to us all that at various stages of life, we grow and we change. And sometimes that's not always at the same rate with the person that we came up with. And so our onus and our loyalty is that when we feel like those things are changing, that we acknowledge them, we tell the truth about it. Because this fake loyalty situation, because we've known each other for 10 years or 15 years, it just doesn't work. It's a breeding ground for resentment and dishonoring. It really is. Because again, you will dishonor yourself first. And then because you've dishonored yourself, you will go and dishonor others. Because how can you truly be happy for them when you are not even happy for yourself? And so that brings me to this idea that you have to center yourself and you have to center around yourself and allow other people to be in your orbit. Now, some of you are going to need to take a moment to process what I just said, because when I said centering self, you're going to be like, well, he's telling me to be self centered. And in the context of the world and feeling like it's selfish in a negative way, and that it egotistical in a negative way, I want you to decompress from that. I want you to decompress from that. I want you to dial it back a little bit and really just think of it in terms of grounding yourself. In grounding yourself, your foundational blocks, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, have to be grounded in who you are as a person. Those are the things that are going to anchor you, your morals, your values, those internal fibers that make you tick and talk and move and sway. I'm telling you to center those things in who you are and your identity first before you try to go out there and do something for somebody else. Because here's what I know: if you are not centered in the type of love that you have for yourself, if you are not centered in your emotional stability of self, if you are not affirmed in the identity of self, you cannot go out there and give it wholly to someone else. You'll just be out in the world giving out fragments of who you are, who you think you should be to people. And what it also breeds when you have not centered around self and anchored and built the foundation around self is that you go looking for who you should be in everybody that you interact with. And that is a level of codependency that happens. And that is a huge problem, because you meet this person and you try to become what that person wants you to be or what you think they want you to be. And then when that doesn't work, you go to the next person and the next person and the next person. But what happens over time is that there's gonna become a point where you have to sit with yourself. You're gonna have to sit with yourself, because you'll cycle through enough people if you can, and it will not work out. And you will get back to that place of self and you will feel very empty. and you'll feel very disturbed in your mental capability, in your spiritual capability, in your nervous system. You're just going to be like, I don't know what to do. I just feel empty. Who am I supposed to be? How am I supposed to think? What am I supposed to do? And so if you had started with the centering of self, emotional, physical, romantic, spiritual, all the things, if you had a steeped heavily in self first, right? And you would have been sure and affirmed and acknowledged in self, you would have then gone out there and in every person that you met, you would have done the same thing. You wouldn't have shown up looking for who to be. You would have shown up giving who you are to those people. And the right people, right? The right people will continue to come to you because what you have works for them in your authenticity, and hopefully they're living in their authenticity. But if you for whatever reason feel unwavering, you feel like a person that has to conform constantly and you have to manipulate and augment yourself to fit in a situation and make it work, you're going to find yourself back at an empty place because you're going to be rejected over and over and over again, and that is due to self-harming. So the idea of centering self is very, very important. I would say to each and every one of you listening, when was the last time that you just looked at yourself with complete sincerity and 100% surety and said, I know who I am? When was the last time that you've done it? And you said to yourself, I know exactly who I am. And you didn't waver and you didn't falter in it. And if you are telling yourself unequivocally, I do that every day, I'm going to challenge you to affirm that and acknowledge it again. Go look in the mirror, look at yourself, don't just do it and do it blindly and empty, right? I want you with every fiber of your being, as if you were going to go counsel the most important person out there in the world. Because we all like to tell other people about themselves and who they are and what they should do and how to fix them. I want you to take that same energy, that same depth and emotion, and I want you to look in the mirror and I want you to firmly tell yourself that I know exactly who I am without wavering. Now, if you look in the mirror and you are affirmed in that way and you're like, yep, and I feel good doing it, and you just get the warm and fuzzies all over, you're like, yep, because that's always who I've been. But if you have to stop for a second and look yourself up and down and say for a moment, am I? I mean, is that true? Is there anything? You might still have some work to do. You might still have some work to do. Now, depending on what you've done, where you are, and who you're with, your work could be to one extreme or the next. I'm not here to tell you what level that is, but if there's an inkling there about it, I think it's worth checking into. It is worth checking into. And what I will tell you is if you find that you are not centered in yourself in that way, that once you start centering in yourself in that way, watch how the people move around you, right? Because, like I said, you want to center around self and then you want everyone else to kind of orbit around and come to your in alignment in that way. You know what I mean? Center around self and allow everybody else in alignment and in your orbit. And so watch how they begin to move. There are going to be some people that energetically just start gravitating to you more because there are some people that recognize when you are at the precipice and you're at the brink of something great. And sometimes there are people that are just waiting for it because they're at the precipice too, or they have reached the precipice already. And they're like, I recognize that point. And they're just waiting for you. And they're not rushing you, they're not pushing you, but they're like, you know what? I'm gonna wait on standby. And when my friend wakes up in that way, oh my God, we are gonna hold hands and we're gonna drift off into the sunset together, Or if that's your lover or whoever, is important in your life, that's what will happen, right? For those people. But if you start noticing that people pull away from you, if people start pulling away from you and like, oh, they don't want to talk to you as much now, they don't want you around as much now when you are, you know, displaying and speaking and communicating as and with and to this person that you are becoming and affirming and acknowledging, if they just seem to be backing slowly away, no matter who it may be, it is incumbent of you to let those people go. It is incumbent upon you to let those people go, because those are not the people that are for you, the real you. They are just not for you. And it doesn't make them bad people. It just means that you people are no longer in alignment with each other. You have become exactly who you were supposed to be, and you have anchored in exactly the way you are. But what I will tell you what happens is, especially in relationships, romantic relationships and marriages, when you realize that you have been so imbalanced for a long time and you come to that place of emptiness in terms of emotions, identity, center, core values, and you're like, wait a minute, I don't even feel like me anymore. And this happens a myriad of ways. It sometimes happens when you start having children and you have to shift your priorities, and then you look around at the person that you're with and they're not on board, and it makes you begin to question who they are, and then it makes you question where the hell you've been, because now you notice they not really good people for you. You understand what I'm saying? Sometimes it happens at that. Sometimes it happens after you have children and those children go off to college, and then you're there to sit and look with each other. It's like, my God, how did I miss that you've become this asshole? How have I missed that you are just this person that is not romantic, right? Because you're back to that space and opportunity where you have to deal with self. And if you were not anchored properly and centered in self, you find yourself trying to figure out how to get back on balance where you were off balance. And so, again, what we do is we make it somebody else's fault, right? We make it somebody else's fault. Well, I, I'm this person now, and so they need to respond accordingly. No, 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 no. You show up as who you are, allow them to show you who they are. And when you guys are no longer in alignment, then you make the decision to move on, and it's okay. Because if you are operating from a place of love and you're operating from a place of completeness and fulfillment, you will understand that your fulfillment is your fulfillment as theirs is theirs. And sometimes loving people and allowing them to exist in their fullness is letting them go to where they can find it. Amen. And allowing them to move out of the way so that you can find yours. One of the things I said after I exited my last relationship, and people were like, "Oh my God, I thought you guys were going to get married. I can't believe that happened. And you should be mad at him for cheating, and you should do this and that and that." And I said, "No, I'm not upset with him. I'm not. I mean, of course, it could have ended better, and I dealt with that accordingly. But I'm glad he moved out of the way so that I can find the person that was meant for me. I'm not mad about him cheating and going over there or whatever. We could have handled it properly, of course. So there's a betrayal aspect, but I am glad that you moved out of the way so I could find the person that was meant for me." So, in having that mindset, there's no space in my heart, in my mind, and in my spirit to harbor any feelings. He didn't belong to me anyway. He was mine for the time that we were together, and I enjoyed every moment of it, minus finding out the cheating portion of it. But the rest of it was pretty amazing, up until the day I found out was amazing. And so I don't live in that what could have been, what should have been, and he owed me anything. Absolutely not. I thank you so much for moving out of the way so I can find the love that is meant for me. I didn't make him responsible for anything. I centered right back on who I was and who I was becoming. And I said, okay, what do I learn about myself after being in a relationship for 5 years? What do I learn? What did I learn that I liked that I didn't know if I liked before? What is something that I said that I didn't like that I didn't try, but now I like it because I did try it? And how many more things do I want to experience out there in the world? That is what I did. I went right back to centering around self. Right back to centering around self. And when people say to me, well, do you feel like you did anything? Do you feel like there was something that you did to make him cheat? I said, listen, people are who they are. And it is possible, that there was something about me that as we grew, that changed, that maybe he didn't look at me the same way because we were two people at different stages of life, And we both emotionally, physically, romantically were in different places. And then you fast forward 5 to 6 years, and we've just grown in different ways. My career took me somewhere. His career was taking him somewhere. My interests were taking me. And yeah, we were there, like, we love each other, and it was great, but there was just something innate about the way that we were moving with each other that just was not working. And for whatever reason, we didn't call it quits. And so I don't have to take responsibility for him cheating. Absolutely, I do not. And I will not. You made that decision. But what I will do is own who I am. What I will do is own who I am and say, you know what? I have grown in so many ways. And if that was something for him, that is his problem. But what I am going to do is continue to focus on the things that make me me and not worried about the one that couldn't deal with me or didn't have it for me or didn't see it for me. I'm going to go over here and find somebody to fulfill these needs and wants and wishes that I have. And so that is how I moved on. And I'm not upset. Hopefully, you find love. He seems to be in love. Hopefully, you find love where you are. And even if that doesn't work out, you find love wherever you are meant to be. I am moving in my space as who I am, and trying to connect in the ways that I would like to connect with people. But again, I say this because I've seen so many people where when that does happen, they are so upset. They're like, oh my God, he wants to leave the relationship instead of becoming who I want him to become. Or she wants to leave the relationship. She's mine. I had her all this time. No one belongs to you. And I would venture to say, if you center around who you are, your wants, your needs, your desires, who you become, and who you want to become, if you really centered around that, and then you looked outward and understood that the person that was in front of you was incapable of being, incapable of receiving, doing the things that the person that you are now and the person you are growing to be. If you realize they weren't capable of those things, that you would be like, yeah, I don't want them around anyway. Oh, I don't want them around anyway. Right. But instead, people get fixed on, it's been 10 years. They get fixed on, well, we got married. And so now we have to make it work. Okay. So you are living in dishonesty and you are living in disloyalty to yourself. And because you are being disloyal and dishonest with yourself, so are you dishonoring the people around you. And far too many times have I seen people stay in marriages because they want to give a perception to their churches, their social organizations, their friends, their family, their children. But what happens when the veil is finally lifted and the truth finally comes out? Then your reputation is sullied. Your reputation is sullied. Your credibility ruined. Your morals and values completely shot. And then internally, you are empty. You are just as empty. So, what could be worse? What could be worse? And this is a real question. What could be worse? Or should I say, what is worse? Allowing the foundation to be ripped from up under you and to be demolished right in your face because you refuse to address it? Or would you like to recenter, refocus, and restructure that foundation to accommodate the house, the rooms, the spaces that you curated, right? And give you the structure that is going to set you for the future. Which one would you rather do? One of them is more painful and more costly than the other, I will tell you. I'd rather I would rather address my foundation, reshape it, refix it, resurface it to what I need for now and to set me up for the future than to wait for the outside elements to come in and destroy and destruct it. And then I have to figure out from there what to do. So I say this to say that the art of letting go is something that we have to start within ourselves. We have to start within ourselves. And it really looks like evaluating what your wants and needs and values are. You just have to really, really dig deep in what that looks like. I've given you every situation from my child, my mother, my siblings, some friends. I've given you every aspect of it. Maybe not coworkers, right? But I've given you nearly every aspect of it just to illustrate how important it is to do the centering of self, the self-centering work. But if I can leave you with something else, my hope is that in figuring out what your art of letting go looks and feels like, my hope is that you find a way to remain who you are and who you are meant to become. Because the key to living your life is being you. And if at any moment you begin living it for everyone and everything else but you are lost and you are just no longer. And so I would much rather you find who you are now. Find who you are now while you still have the time, while you still have the energy, while you're still able to reflect, while you're still able to build. I would much rather you find it out now than 40, 50, 60 years from now when you've exhausted every single relationship that you had and it did not work. Because if you are inauthentic and if you are not living in the truth, it's going to catch up to you. It is going to catch up to you. I would much rather you figure that out now so you can bring the people into your orbit and into your alignment that matter, that work with you, that synergize with you. I would rather you find that out now than to wait until you've tried to become somebody else for everybody else, doing everything else but what it is that you needed to do for you. I would much rather you figure that work out now. So that is my hope. So I thank you all for the time today. It has been a wonderful conversation, but this, ladies, gentlemen, and they, them, is the art of letting go. All right. Now, y'all go out there and have the most amazing day. And as my girl Tab would say, even if you can't, don't you dare go messing up nobody else's. All right. I'll see y'all on the next one. Peace and love, y'all. Bye.